Hello, my name is Angela Gaines, and I'm here to present my argument about using Creole and Pidgin languages in the classroom in order to foster a better environment for learning. I'll be going through some definitions, explaining why this topic is relevant, and then describing Creoles in the United States. So what is Pidgin and what is Creole? According to Irene Thompson of AboutWorldLanguages.com, Pidgin languages occur when people that speak different languages come together, intermix, and create an improvised second language which allows everyone to be able to communicate with each other. That Pidgin language becomes the first language of the descendants, thus Creole. Nobody speaks Pidgin as their first language. But that said, there really is no one true theory that explains the genesis of Creole languages. Okay, so why is this topic important? Well, while listening to Malcolm Gladwell's revisionist history, there was one episode that stuck out. It was Miss Buchanan's period of adjustment, and it was about the fallout that happened after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. After the decision was made, many of the black teachers were fired, which was a problem then and continues to be a problem now. The conscious and unconscious biases of the Caucasian teachers became a problem and are still issues for students of color today. These biases drastically affect students' ability to learn, resulting in higher numbers of suspensions and low expectations. While going through the podcast, it was noted that students learn better when they have a teacher that looks like them, that comes from the same background or culture. And culture includes language, or the languages a student may speak. Unfortunately, because standard English is considered the appropriate way to speak, and Pidgins, Creoles, and other dialects are not, you'll be hard-pressed to find schools that use Creoles in their lessons. Now, there are Creoles all over the world, mainly because of colonialization, so you'll mainly hear of English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese Creoles, but there are others. I'll be concentrating on the Creoles that developed in the United States, namely the Gullah language of the Geechee people, Hawaii Creole English, and arguably AAVE, or African American Vernacular English. The Gullah language is an English-based Creole that is influenced by West and Central African languages. As you can see in the picture, the Geechee people inhabited the coastline of the southern portion of North Carolina, continuing through the coastlines of South Carolina and Georgia, and ends at the northern portion of Florida. This language has been passed down for generations, starting with African slaves that were brought over to work the rice plantations. Gullah is still spoken today, with many high school students speaking it as their first language and English as their second, with none of the teachers knowing anything about the language, which sometimes leads to some students becoming functionally illiterate. Now, there has been talk of training the teachers to have a working knowledge of the language so that they can better understand their students and help them learn. Dr. Virginia Garrity, writer and defender of the Gullah language, has even suggested having classes entirely in the Gullah language in order to make students more comfortable and open to learning. This, of course, would all take extra funding, which has been difficult in other situations, which we will soon learn. Hawaii Creole English, or HCE, is also an English-based Creole that has influence of Hawaiian and 9 other languages. The language was originally spoken among those that worked on sugar and pineapple plantations, and it eventually became the island's primary language. Unfortunately, HCE is associated with those of lower socioeconomic status and not a language you want to use in school or work. However, in the 1970s, linguists began a hard push to get teachers speaking HCE in the classroom, as evidence from studies suggested that students would benefit, and they did. But later, in 1987, a couple of school board members went to visit a school in a rural area and were appalled when they heard teachers speaking to students using Hawaii Creole English. They immediately began a campaign to force students to use standard English with their students. Fortunately, linguist teachers and community members all attended the school board meetings in order to defend the use of HCE in classrooms. The school board then opted to revise the policy, asking the teachers to model standard English for their students, but not cut out HCE entirely. There was only one problem: funding. The school board could not support their teachers in making sure that both languages would be used in order to make sure students would have a good enough grasp on standard English in order to later succeed in their future endeavors. So Hawaii kind of has the opposite problem that those that speak the Gullah language had, as well as AAEV. African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, has a long history of whether it should be considered a dialect or a Creole. There are currently 3 different theories of its origin. That is an English-based Creole. 2 is an English dialect slaves picked up from Southern whites. And 3 is derived from West African languages. There's still a lot of research that needs to be had. Either way, much like Hawaii Creole English, it is considered a language of the lower class that should not be used outside of the community. But back to the theories. The third theory caused quite a bit of controversy in 1996, namely the Ebonics controversy. The Oakland School Board in California issued a resolution, which was understood to imply that African Americans, specifically their African American students, spoke a separate language, not a dialect of English, and should qualify for bilingual education grants. The reasoning was the same as the linguists in Hawaii to improve the academic achievements of their Black student population. If you want an idea of how the country reacted to this resolution, Google Ebonics controversy and click on images. Some of the images resulting from the backlash are still available. Now, Oakland's attempt at receiving funding to make sure their students will be able to leave school proficient in both AAVE and standard English was admirable and should be the goal. So what should we take away from this? Creole should be used in schools. Integrating a student's culture into their education, including their language, helps them learn. It helps bridge the gaps between students and teachers and fosters a healthy learning environment. This isn't to say that students should not be proficient in standard English. Realistically, students need standard English in order to be successful in the United States. They just should not have to give up a part of their culture in order to do so. And last, here are a list of my references that I used for my paper and presentation, including Mr. Gladwell's podcast, if you wanted to go and take a listen to that when you get the chance. Thank you.